Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Gagnon Atelier. I'm your old pal, Tim Gagnon, and this is the Modern Masters Podcast. Well, welcome to the show, everybody. We are back. This is officially the first episode of the Modern Masters Podcast, Season 3. I'm really excited about it. We got some really awesome guests lined up. Here's my list of guests. Boom, boom. Look at them all. They're all there. Did you notice one is Tim Gagnon? Yeah, one of my guests is going to be Tim Gagnon. And not this Tim Gagnon, but the other Tim Gagnon. So that'll be really fun. But today's episode, we have got a very special guest. I met her just a couple weeks ago at the Portrait Society of America's annual conference, The Art of the Portrait. And that was in Atlanta, Georgia. And so I met her and we hung out and got to chit chat for quite a bit, hit it off really well. And so I asked her if she would come on this broadcast. But before we bring her on, do me a favor. As always, if you can hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, depending on where you're watching this. If you're watching it on Facebook, if you're watching it on YouTube, just hit those candy-like buttons to subscribe and like. Hit that notification bell so that when the next broadcast comes out, you can be notified and you can let us know. And also hit the share button. Let your friends know about this show because we bring you the best of the best of the best of today's working artists. That is no joke. We've been blessed to have that as a big part of this show. And so if you want to learn more about us and what we're doing, you can check us out at the GagnonAtelier.com. That's our official website. And we would appreciate you checking that out and all the things that we are doing. All right. Well, with that said, let me tell you a little bit about our guest. She is just an amazing, wonderful artist. And she is just recently won the Bennett Award, which is a huge, major, no joke accomplishment in the art world. That is one of the top awards in the art world that you can get. And so she is the winner of the Bennett Prize. And so we are going to bring her on right now, my brand new friend, Ayana Ross. And there you are. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. This is great.
Well, thank you for coming. It worked out pretty well. I'm glad you're here. I'm excited. I can't wait to talk to you some more about your artwork and stuff. I just told the audience that we met at the Portrait Society's annual conference, The Art of the Portrait. Mm-hmm. And so obviously that would mean that you are a figurative portrait artist.
Yes.
And so you like to paint the people, as I can see in the background behind you. That is exciting. Plus, you're just a swell gal, I got to say.
Oh,
I enjoyed hanging out with you. My job at that little party that we were all hanging out at was to basically hold all the ladies' purses while they danced. And that was my job. I sat on the couch. And they were all like, "Hey, Tim, hold my purse." And I was like, "Just like home. I'm holding purses, just like home. Nothing would change at all." Yeah. So it was a lot of fun. But we got to hang out. We sat on the couch and we chit chatted the night away, and got to know each other and just had a blast. And I said, I have got to get you on the show. And so you are our first guest for season 3.
Hey, well, thank you.
Hey, no problem. That's great. So tell us a little bit about yourself. You live in Atlanta.
I actually live in McDonough, which is about 30 minutes south of Atlanta. I have a studio in Atlanta that I go to, and I'm originally from Georgia, although I've lived in multiple places. And in recent years, my journey has brought me back to Georgia for at least the time being.
Right. People tend to come home eventually. That happens quite a bit. So. Not me, though. I ain't going back up there. It's cold.
Where's up there?
I'm from New Hampshire.
Okay.
They still got snow. No. No, I'm a Florida boy now.
Okay.
I can't handle the cold. When it gets below 70 degrees, I start to whine and complain and cry. And you don't want to be around me. It's messy. So, but you went back to the Georgia area and in the Atlanta area, I guess we'll say. Mm-hmm. And so you've got your studio in Atlanta. And oh, I got your website. Let me post your website right away before we get too far into this conversation. There it is right there, folks. If you want to check her out, if you want to book her for some artwork, that is the website you want to go to. So, all right. So tell us about your art journey. How did you start out getting into art?
My origin story started when I was little. I was always fascinated with drawing people in clothes. And that led me to believe at a young age that I wanted to do fashion design. So that was my first career. When I graduated high school, I went to college and studied apparel design. And I had my first job in the fashion industry. I was a CAD designer, and then I was an assistant designer. And after 9/11, I left New York, kind of got a little displaced with that, and came back to Georgia and couldn't get a job. And, and then I started exploring, because my aunt suggested that I look into teaching. I started exploring teaching, and took the path to art education. And with that, actually, I took my first oil painting class, my first and really only in-person oil painting class, when I was becoming certified as a teacher, and fell in love with painting at that point. Over the years, as I was teaching art, I just made it a point to kind of continue to build on that skill set. And I never really intended to stay with teaching, to be perfectly honest, not in the public school sector. So I taught, always having in my mind, we got to have an exit plan. So eventually, though, I started teaching. I always had to have a part-time job because for a while I was a single mom. So I was teaching, and then I started painting, and then I started, it was suggested by my now husband that I start showing my work and selling the work to people. And then from that, it grew to, okay, I can sell the art. Great. And then it just started to grow and grow. And, I continued to invest in it. And I think the turning point for me was I made a decision of all the little things I was doing on the side that I was trying to do to help support my livelihood. What was the thing I wanted to do that I wanted to spend the rest of my life getting better at? And it was painting. So that's when I kind of said, okay, forsaking all, we're just going to do this, and whatever happens, happens.
Right.
I went to grad school, and and then things kind of took off from there.
No, you went to grad school. What did you go to grad school for?
I studied painting.
Okay. Okay. So you got your MFA then.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. And where did you go?
Savannah College of Art and Design.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. That's one of those colleges all the artists dream of going to. So
yes, and that was why one of the main reasons I went there, because when I was younger, I wanted to go there. But I'm glad I didn't then, because I didn't really know what I wanted to do truly. That's why it's always fascinating to me. I think about starting out drawing people, and I mean as early as I can remember, being 6 years old, walking around with a notebook. But I was stuck on fashion design, right? But not realizing what I was actually doing was figurative work. And I learned to draw people by looking at models and catalogs. And so that was my practice.
Right. That's such a great point. A lot of times, like when I was right out of high school, and my dream was to go to art college, there was a lot of pressure on me. And of course, because you're young, you don't always, do what you don't follow your heart. You sometimes listen to other people. And there was a lot of pressure on me. Oh, go into graphic design, get a degree in graphic design. You'll be able to make a living doing that, because you can't make a living as an artist. You need to have that side gig to make your money at. And so I'm glad, even though I did end up making my living as a graphic designer for many years, that's not my passion. That's not what I like to do. And that's, I can do it, and I can do it very well. And I did do it very well for many years, but I'm glad that I ended up college initially wasn't my path. I ended up having to join the military.
Mhm.
But had I done that, my degree would have been graphic design
Mhm.
instead of painting, an MFA
Mhm.
in painting, and there's a big difference. Now, mind you, I have multiple degrees, but it's like that's the one that's my heart and my passion is
Right.
the MFA in painting. And so I'm glad that I didn't go to college. I'm glad I went in the military just for that reason alone. It changed my trajectory. Who knows?
It's like we have to spend so many years just to build up the courage to be the person that we have always wanted to be.
Right.
And it's
Now, was your family supportive of your artistic dreams growing up, or?
short answer is yes. However, it's just a lot they didn't know. Just like, I didn't know. Um, so I remember when I was younger, when I would draw a picture, my mom still has a picture that I drew because I used to do a lot of Prismacolor. I drew a picture and she framed it and she has it hanging up. I ran into one of my aunts not too long ago and she said to me, next time I see you, I need you to sign something for me. She said, I remember when you were little, you had this picture because I used to always throw away my drawings because I thought it was
Right.
horrible. She said she went in the trash can and pulled it out and she saved it from all of those years ago and she wants me to sign it now. So they were supportive in the way they knew how to be supportive. However, when it came time to choosing a major and planning out a career, when you don't know a real example of someone that did that thing or
Yeah.
how to journey that path, it's hard to be supportive. They're scared, it's like, we want to support you, but we also want you to be able to make a living. And
Yeah.
as a
Eating
parent,
is
I'm guilty
important.
of it too. I do the same thing to my kids.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
have to pull myself back a bit. But yeah, I think they were supportive as they could have been.
Right. Right.
Mhm.
I think it's tough depending on how you were raised. My journey was very similar because I like myself, we grew up, we weren't wealthy or anything like that. It was a little tiny town,
Yeah.
more moose than people. You had to drive multiple cities just to go to a McDonald's,
Right,
things like
right,
that. It was a little tiny
right.
town. And, most people worked in the paper mill. And that was the only place you could really get a good, high paying job.
Mhm.
It was like, and so, like my grandfather was a lumberjack. My dad could not wrap his brain around the concept of Timmy can make a living
Right,
drawing pictures,
right,
and if I would have stayed in my hometown, it would have been nearly impossible to make a living there,
right.
and so he and I clashed heads quite a bit, in growing up over that subject. Obviously, I make up my living as an artist now, and praise God for that. But he had a hard time with that. We bashed heads a lot in
Yeah, it's a
the
real
beginning.
thing. It's a real thing. And that was one of my major platforms when I was teaching in public schools, working with high school students, like especially my AP students who wanted to do something in the art field. Because even they didn't really know what, because they, and being in Georgia, especially, it's like, okay, it's hard to picture real life examples of people that are doing the thing you say you want to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was always one of my platforms, about trying to help them to understand the career path, how to find people that are doing what you want to do and
Right.
study their journey, understanding that you may not be able to stay here and do
Right.
it. So
Right. And nowadays with the internet,
yeah,
it's so different. You could live in the boonies where there's more moose than people and have a thriving artistic career. As long
that's
as you can ship paintings,
yeah,
you can make a living.
yeah,
Um, the internet has changed everything in that aspect.
yes.
But one of the things that is always, I think artists that are like, I'm going to age us, our age and older, we didn't have those things coming up. And so it was almost impossible to figure out, how do I make a living doing this? How do I pull this off? You don't know anybody that can teach you.
Mhm.
Now we have these wonderful things. One of my friends, Matt Tommy, he has a program. It's an artist mentoring program
Okay.
that's really just teaching artists the business side of the art world. He
Okay.
doesn't talk, he's like, look, you need your studio time to get better. but I'm not going to teach you that. I'm going to teach you how to make sure you get your studio time and how you schedule your day. But I'm also teaching you,
Right.
how to make a living doing this. How do you find the shows? How do you get in shows? How do you get in a gallery? How do you sell your art? How do you find your customers? Now we have programs like that, and there's several of them out there where it's those artists mentoring other artists to teach you how to pull those things off. Did you have any mentors in your life that kind of showed you a little bit of the ropes, or did you figure this out the hard way?
The hard way. Yeah, I was thinking as you were talking, I think a lot of that has been birthed out of the fact that so many of us did not have that. So it's like, I recognize I didn't have it. So obviously it's a need. So let me make that. But no, I didn't have that. I even went so far as to one season of life, I thought I was losing my mind. And it's like, I know I can make art. I know this is the thing. This is the thing that I want to do. And
Right.
not just want to do, have to do it, but I can't figure it out. And so I was talking to a therapist at the time, and I'm just pouring my heart out. And she said, have you considered going somewhere else and like reaching out and trying to sell outside of, your circle? Um,
Right.
because at that point, yes, I'd been selling a few things, but it would only go so far,
Right.
locally. So, but no, I didn't have that until I started looking for it. And when I started looking, it was, to your point, because the internet is here now and we have all of these resources. When I started looking, I'm like, oh, there's so many people that have already taken this journey. And then I started studying CVs. I started studying and reading up on, who taught who, and, tracing it all the way back. And there's so many wonderful examples that I look to in my journey. Um, but yeah, so it's out there. It's just, I did not it took me a while to tap into those resources and know that it was accessible.
Right. So
Yeah.
you use the internet as your way to find
Yes.
where those places are. The biggest thing is you got to find your customers.
Hmm.
You have to find, so where do you find them? Well, the internet, you can look, you can find these are the shows I want to be in. These are the artists that I admire. They're obviously selling like hotcakes. Who are they selling to?
Right. Right.
So the quickest way to figure out who they're selling to is what shows are they entering? What shows are they in? What galleries are they in? Things like that. And that's a beautiful thing. You can see other artists that are successful, and you can kind of learn just by watching how they do it, how they
Mhm.
promote themselves online, and then you can use that as your business model. Sometimes you can, if you want to follow a similar career path, and it also depends on what you paint,
Yeah.
how you paint it, why you paint it, things like that. Finding your customers probably, or finding your audience probably is the better word. Finding your
I think
audience
so.
is the thing. As artists, we have to find our artistic voice, but we also have to find an audience for that artistic voice,
It's
and
so many variables that you
it
have to
really is.
tap into. It really is. It's not just it's just so much.
So let's talk about that real. That's a good segue. See how I just segued right into that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your artistic voice. What is your artistic voice, and then let's talk about how you got there, or maybe you want to talk about how you got there to find your artistic voice. But when you think about Ayana Ross's artistic voice, what it is that you're painting, what it is that when you paint, this is your subject matter, this is your heart, this is what you're trying to convey with your art, what you're trying to communicate with your art. Talk to us about that.
Okay. Well, first, I would preface it by saying that I believe that it's a journey. So I am discovering just as much as others that might be looking at my work are discovering, so, and I leave the door open for that. So, but my fascination started first with people, that was baseline. And then second, I've always had this fascination with my family history. And I think that was something that started as a theme of sorts that I used to like to paint a lot. And then it expanded from just my family narrative and, why um, we do things a certain way, why things are a particular way in society, in historical context, to, okay, well, it's not just my family. It wasn't just my family that had the separation of siblings, one going to New York, one staying in the South. There was something called the Great Migration, so things like that, those types of stories. It's not just my family who had these stories of great land ownership and maybe even land loss. Um, but how does that spread out and reflect itself um, in the greater society? So that type of thing was always fascinating to me, and so I would try to paint those narratives. And then it expanded to, wow, a lot of people have a really great story that kind of give us an idea of who we are and how we got to where we are, and maybe even a glimpse of how to get to where we're going. I see myself as an ambassador of mankind. Like, my job is to listen, look, and document for the purpose of helping others to look and see themselves and see the world, and um, kind of help us to reassess, I guess, at times. So that's my fascination. And that's a big part of what I look for when I paint a picture, or I run up to someone in the grocery store, like we were talking about earlier, and say, can I paint you? Um, but I think that it's going to be ever evolving. And I think it goes from this wider sphere, and it's going to eventually kind of like be a little bit
I
more
know.
centered to,
I
yeah.
know.
But I leave room for that because, like I said, the big question for me was, what do I want to spend the rest of my life getting better at? And that's better not just technically, but also intuitively, understanding the work. So,
Right. When you're doing a portrait, you're trying to capture a bit of that person's soul
hmm
in the paint, and trying to get that personality and who they are, and that's a skill that can be developed, and it's something that takes your whole life. You're constantly chasing after that. When you're talking about history and family history and all of that, it reminded me of there's a book called Art History for Dummies, which is my kind of book. And but one of the things that the author says is that the written word is the diary of the past. It's people telling you about what they did and what happened and this and that. But art history is the home movie of the past. It
Mm.
shows you what you wore when you were a kid. It shows you how you laughed when you were younger. It shows you what people were like, and their personalities come through, and you can see and feel, and it's a deeper connection. And so portrait painting is the same way. It's like you're capturing a bit of that person, and it's not like a photographic snapshot of a moment in time. It's deeper because it's that connection between the artist and the subject, and trying to have that come across. It's very different than any other form of medium, portraiture, painting, and
Right.
illustration. There's a stronger connection, I think, between subject and artist, simply because of the time that is spent with the person, but also the hours and hours and hours from the artist focusing on that person.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, I know when I'm painting figures and subjects, I'm thinking, well, what are the things I want to really illuminate here? And it's a lot of questions I would imagine that artists are asking themselves throughout the process. Because if it were just to recreate, then yeah, I could just take a picture and just call it a day, right?
Right.
But it is for something more. So yeah.
Yeah, that is a powerful thing. So when we're talking about your artistic voice and we're talking about your journey there, what right now where you're at in that journey, because 10 years from now, you most likely will be painting very differently than you do now, and possibly even completely different subjects. But so right now in your current artistic journey and your artistic voice, sometimes I feel like my artistic voice is like baby babble. It's baby talk because I'm still learning. And hopefully in another 10 years, I'll be able to at least talk coherently, artistically, that's where I'm at. At least I feel that way most of the time. But what is the thing that you love to paint, that particular subject? Amongst portraiture, there's so many different things you can paint and ways you can paint. You have a very unique style to your work that is just wonderful. And, that's one of the things that I love is when I look at your artwork, I recognize it. Like you could show me a lineup and I could walk up to yours and go, there's Ayana's work.
Okay, well, that's awesome. That's great to know.
Yeah, it is. It is. And that's really good. So when you're painting, what are some of the things that like when you're painting, you're going to paint something, a person, but you're going to paint them, like, talk to me about your process and talk to me about your thought process anyway, on I'm going to paint these kind of subject matters and these kinds of poses and these kinds of things like that. Talk to me a little bit about your thought process.
I think it's twofold. One, I like to paint narratives that are reflective of things I experienced growing up. So, and I have a number of pieces that are reflective of church scenes or being in a church or dressing up for church, and that era, I guess, because I don't know if people really dress up that way anymore. I don't know, but I like
to go to a Florida church. The preachers wearing flip flops and sandals and stuff like that. So yeah.
So I like to paint images of that, but then I realized that, speaking of the right now, what I'm really trying to capture is those moments of divine, and it's not necessarily akin to religion or church. It's just everyday people engaging in something that is divine. I make a lot of biblical and church references. So one way that my mind works now is like, oh, I'll see someone doing something. Wow, that's really interesting. That reminds me of this in the Bible, And so I might put a modern day, looking at it like a modern day, like this is actually a true representation of what it means to be this spiritual person that we can relate to because you can see it out in front of you.
Right.
Most often my subjects are people of color, but I don't think of it that way. I think it's like my own canon, it's just, and it's interesting for me when it comes to talking about race with my work, because a lot of times, like, oh, people say, oh, you only paint Black people. And no, not necessarily. It's just that for those stories that I'm capturing, that's what comes to mind, or that's what I see. And that's what I want to illuminate, because I think, we're always trying to fill a void, it's as much as art has in recent years been produced, showing an array of people. There's still a deficit. We can still paint more and still not balance out the scale. So yeah, so that's usually what I'm looking for, and I love to illuminate those everyday moments as divine as they are, because I think a lot of times we take for granted some of those things. So,
well, I love the fact that you keep using a particular word, illuminate. And one of the things, like my whole thing is that I paint illuminations. I paint biblical scripture with gold leaf and like those old illuminated manuscript Bibles. But the word illuminate in that context, what it literally means is it's this ancient Jewish Hebrew tradition that goes all the way back to when they were captives in Babylon. And what it's called the Hidur mitzvah. And what it means is the beautification of the Torah. And so what they would do is they were trying to figure out what this particular passage in the Bible meant, and it said to glorify God or exalt God. And they were looking at the word. It was a weird word in the Hebrew, and they were like, "What does that mean?" What these ancient Hebrew rabbis, they were like, "What does that mean?" And what they after their study, they came to the conclusion that it meant to glorify God by creating beautiful art.
Love that.
Yeah, I know, huh? Boom. And so I've dedicated my entire life to that concept. And so that's when the Hebrews started to illuminate scripture by making the beautiful calligraphy, but then doing all these decorations around it. And if they were to make a Kaddish cup or a wedding ceremony, a wedding invitation, it couldn't just be text. It had to be beautiful. It had to be calligraphy. It had to be gold leaf. It had to have glitter. It had to have all this stuff to make it pizzazz, you know? And so, but their point is we're going to glorify God by making this thing that is like, who cares? It's just, you know, it's a pencil. No, we have to make it a beautiful pencil as a way to worship God, as a way to give him glory. And so when you're painting these pictures that you're doing, and you keep saying, I want to illuminate these people, I want to illuminate this topic, it's like, without even realizing it, that's what you're doing. You know, is you're glorifying God by making beautiful art. And it's an act of worship in many, many ways. And not only for you, but for the viewer who's looking at the art too. And that's one of the powerful things about art, is that emotional connection that it gives to people. And so it's really powerful, the connection you can make. Well, let's show some of your awesome art, and we can talk about it, because you sent me 3 pieces of art that just made me go Shazam, and I love them. So let's take a look at these. I've got 2 of them. The first one, there's 2 together because they're skinny, and so I put them together. So talk to me about these 2, because they are just adorable. I love this one. Look at that. Look at that, mon Dieu. I love it. Talk to me about these 2 paintings.
Well, another thing I was going to say, in addition to the focus on people, there are certain elements that I like to include in my work that are related to things from my background, my history. But one of the things that I oftentimes do is incorporate some sort of print or pattern. And these 2 were the one on, well, I don't know how you will view it, but with the young boy on one side, that gingham print, that was my first one using that, and that one's called Tug of War. And the other is She Who Knows, Knows. So that's a common thing that I'll incorporate. More often than not, when I'm using that gingham, it's my way of placing the work in context, the subject in context, like where I'm talking about, where I'm looking at. And so for these are like in America, that fabric that connects us all. So that's what these 2 are. I will speak more, especially about She Who Knows, because for this one, when I painted it, I was thinking a lot about literature. I love books. I love to read. And when I paint, I listen to books all the time. And for me, speaking of that journey of understanding my path and what options were out there, it took reading and researching to understand a world that was outside of the world that I live in. And so I always thought, or I think that it is a crime whenever we take literature away and say, hey, you should not read this, you cannot read this, because through reading, we get a chance to understand a world beyond our own world. And it's just really important to build that empathy and to build that connection. So that's a lot of what that work was about.
Awesome. One of the things that I'm noticing, you know, in all of your art, but these 2 in particular that I absolutely just love about it, it's striking in these paintings, is that the background, it's very 2-dimensional. It's very flat. And then you have this beautiful three-dimensional object, the figures on top of it, and that juxtaposition is just so striking. And it just works so well, you know. I absolutely, you know, it's like the pattern is this in the background, just like almost like a green screen, and she's just in front of it like that, and he's in front of it.
Yeah.
I really just think that is so striking, such a powerful imagery, you
Well,
know.
I do that because, and I have a few pieces where I've done it where the clothing of the figure kind of blends into the background. And that's because I wanted to say, you know, there are so many people out here that we don't see. We just don't see them as we're going on our day to day, but they have so many lessons to teach us.
Mm.
So that's kind of what that is in reference to. But I also try to make it a point to add that to the element to kind of bring my goal is to bring people back. Like you got to stay on your toes a little bit to look at it,
Mhm.
is what I'm thinking. But it's funny because sometimes I will forget and I'll get too caught up. It's like, wait a minute, something's off here. Like, oh, okay, we're getting sucked in. We gotta kind of break this up a little bit. So, but yeah.
That's just amazing, just amazing. Well, here, let's look at this. We got two more to look at. We're saving the big fancy awarded one for last. But here's the next one that I really just found fascinating. Look at this one. This, and you were talking about incorporating churchy stuff
Yes.
and your church upbringing into it. So talk to me about this painting.
So the name of this painting is Sinner's Row.
Oh, is that the road that me and my older brother sat on?
Well, it's when I started painting the picture, I painted it because it reminded me of, I was thinking about this, my childhood memories, you know, growing up in the church and this idea of being baptized and the excitement that was built around it. But then also looking at it from the lens as an adult, having lived through many life experiences. And, you know, as with most things, there's a duality. You know, there's some things that as we say, you can chew the meat and spit out the bone. But I was thinking about this idea of being a child and needing to be mm, this idea of having to be cleansed or changed or what have you. So when I started the piece, I painted the young girls on the bench, and they all have different expressions and different reactions to what's about to take place. And on the cross in the background, you can't really tell in the photograph, but there are little painted hot pink toes. This is a woman on the cross.
Oh God.
And um, when my aunt came, and this is a different aunt from the one that I was referencing earlier. When my aunt came over and she saw what I was working on, she shared this amazing story with me of when she was young, going to the same church when she was little. Um, she was told, she and her friends, and I think she said they're around 8, 10 years old, they were told to go sit on the front row. And so they did, you know, being obedient. And they're thinking, okay, this, you know, we did something good. But while they're sitting on the front row, the pastor starts to reprimand them.
Oh no.
Yeah. And to this day, you know, she couldn't really tell me why. She didn't know why, but they were getting in trouble and they were referred to as sinners. And I thought, you know, that's horrible. You know, you're just for being this young kid, this young girl. So and likewise their expressions, because they thought it was one thing, it ended up being another, um, was a mix of delight and nervousness. So that's why I took that title, Sinner's Row, for that.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then that overgrowth in the back is just this recognition that you know, the way we view things with religion and that idea of church has changed, and I don't know if it's evolving, but it has changed, and it's not um That's a way of thinking that we don't necessarily, and some of it don't necessarily still hold on to. So it's a lot of layers and content in this one. So
that's one of the things about art, though, is that art can dive into deep subjects
yeah.
that sometimes words struggle to explain, you know, and we all have our different upbringings.
Hmm.
I was we were pretty much Christmas and Easter Catholics growing up. We didn't go very often at all. But boy, we went to catechism, and we had to go to catechism, and I goofed off like you wouldn't believe. And when we would go to church, we played Pew Wars. I don't know if you know what Pew Wars is, but
I
Pew
can
Wars,
imagine.
the pew in front of you, you put your hands on it like this, right?
Hmm.
And so you spread out your hands depending on things. So my brother and I would sit next to each other, and the game of Pew Wars is who could get the most amount of real estate by stretching your arms out to have the most amount of space on the pew. And then he's pushing his hand against mine like this and trying to make my arms go this, but I'm trying to go wide. And we would play this game ferociously. And there were multiple rounds because in Catholic Church, you got to kneel, you got to stand, you got to sit, so you could only play it during the standing times.
Hmm.
And so we would play this game ferociously until Dad would lean over and he would grab both of our heads, go do and knock our heads together. And then we'd be like, okay, game over. The referee has halted the game.
Yeah, well, pieces like that though, it really is intended more of a conversation starter.
Yes.
I had a wonderful conversation with the collector once about the piece because she shared some of her childhood experiences and then reflections now as an adult, and I did the same because it can get kind of personal and deep. And I think that's part of the reason why I try to choose my words carefully when I talk about it. But yeah, pieces like that, it can be very charging and
But to me, that can be a very healthy, good thing to have those conversations. I think a lot of times we shy away from those conversations because you know what? Guess what? Churches have hurt a lot of people very deeply over the years. And that's because, newsflash, people are involved. And
yeah.
people, as wonderful and amazing as, because we're portrait artists, we're figurative artists, we love people. People are awesome, but people can also be awful.
Yeah, and for that, that's why that woman's on the cross because it's more of a historical context. It's not just people or a person. It's this idea that even in church, there's still, regardless of what you say, there's still these hierarchies and these mindsets that need to be transformed. And to
Sure.
so yeah, all that.
And that, but again, those are great conversations to have, and art can cause people to have those conversations, you know. And I think we need to have those deeper conversations, and then that's how we grow as people. That's how we get better. That's how we can really, share our hearts and draw closer and get to where we need to go. And, a lot of times, that Jesus said they will know you by your love for one another, but the church hasn't always been the most loving to each other. When you're putting a bunch of kids on the front row and publicly shaming them, that's not love. That's just not, that's just, and so, but having this painting, makes me, as a very active church member and a leader in my church and all these things, it makes me go, that's pain that needs to be talked about. That's things that we need to look in the mirror. And so I love pieces of art that can make us think and go deeper. So I'm all for it. I think it's absolutely fabulous. So let's go to the next one. I'm so excited about this next one. Ibenum de Monsieur. You're making me talk French. Here we go. Talk to us about this one. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. This is the one that you won the Bennett Award for, correct?
Well, submitted several. This
Okay.
was one of the ones that I submitted. Yes.
Okay. So this is one of the submissions to it. Now,
Mhm.
just for people that don't know, before we show the painting, what exactly is the Bennett Award for those that don't know?
So the Bennett Prize was established by Stephen Bennett and Dr. Elaine Schmidt, and it's a prize for figurative women artists. It's the largest prize for figurative women artists.
Yeah.
It is a $50,000 award over the span of 2 years with a solo show and a host of other things that aren't mentioned. So
Right.
just to be a finalist for the
It's a
Bennett Prize
very big deal.
is a huge deal and life changing. So yeah, so that's what it is. So this piece that you're referencing was one of the ones I submitted, but it also is in the Bennett Prize, because I'm actually in the Bennett Prize 2 cycle. So it's in the Bennett Prize 2 traveling show, which travels throughout the US. And this one it's the acronym. It's that stands for Student Will Be Able to and Learn. As a former teacher, and other teachers out there could probably recall, there was a period of time when our objectives, we wrote them on the board every day so that administration came in, they knew exactly what we were teaching. And it was that acronym for Student Will Be Able to. I can't remember all the letters off the top of my head right now. So yeah, so that's what this one is. I painted it um, in the midst of COVID, or as COVID was really getting to the point where schools were closed.
Mhm.
And it was that big debate about whether or not to send students back to school, whether or not teachers needed to be in the classroom, things of that nature. And as a mother and as a teacher of high school, where we have hundreds of students that, were coming into the classroom every day, and understanding how schools are not always quite equipped to clean and do the things that one would need to do at the beginning of COVID, when we didn't know a whole lot about it.
Mhm.
I had some concerns, but I painted this piece because, and it's in the background, it's just like a collage of elements from home, from school, over that debate of whether a child can learn at home versus at school. I remember reading and hearing a lot of statistics, and they were talking about so many um, cases of child abuse weren't being reported because kids weren't in school. So many kids were hungry because they weren't in school. But then there was also the other side of it, at least that I experienced personally. There were kids that were thriving who had never done well in school, who were
Right.
doing well online, and they found what works for them because they didn't have to juggle the social aspect and the changing classes. It was just, and it just, that idea that people thought that one thing worked for everyone, like, it's just not true.
Right.
I mean, there are some that need to be in the building, but there are some that we can't ignore that are doing really, really well. And I don't know about this year because I'm not in the classroom, but I did know that last year that I had some that just chose not to come back in person
Mhm.
because it was working so well for them. I have some that got on a plan to graduate early, and it's just society is changing. Education hasn't changed as much as it should and as quickly as society has. But yeah, so I was thinking about all those things in making this piece. And ironically, the photo that I used, that I referenced for this, was of a student from maybe 5 years back. She was in my class working, and she was working so diligently, and her mom worked in the building. So I went up to her mom, was like, "Your daughter is so adorable today. Do you mind if I take a picture of her while she's working?" I said, "I may paint it one day." And she said, "Yeah." So I had that photo, and I used it for this piece.
Awesome. It's a beautiful painting. You know, it's like I've got uh 4 daughters, two of my own and two of my stepdaughters. And when little girls are just little like that, there's just, it's pure gold. There's
And when you
nothing.
see them just focusing on
Oh,
something,
I know.
that
It's
was
just,
the beauty of it. It's that because that's the thing that we want, whether we're learning in the classroom or at home, that ability to focus. And
yeah.
that was the thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I mean, we homeschooled all the kids, and then they went into public school later on, and it homeschooling can be a blessing and a curse. It takes a kid that can. You have to be very self motivated. If the kid can
Hmm.
study and do their work without being monitored,
Hmm.
homeschooling, they'll thrive, they'll excel, they can graduate early. A lot
Yeah.
of my friends, their kids graduate of high school and had their associate's degree already.
Hmm.
They had their AA at 16, 17 years old, from homeschooling, and they're amazing, thriving adults now, and then there are others like mine that homeschooled, and it was like the reason I'm balding is because I had my kids in homeschooling programs, and the stress of that. It's like, how you doing in school? Oh, I'm doing great, Dad. Everything's going great. Then the principal calls me. Yeah, your daughter hasn't even logged in 2 weeks. We're about to tell her. Ah! Yeah,
Yeah.
it could be a hot mess. But going back to the Bennett Awards, so just so people clarify, because there's a lot of artists that are starting out. A lot of hobbyist artists watch this program and they want to know how to get to where you are. They've never heard of the Bennett Award. The Bennett Award, and you're right. It's just a wonderful, beautiful people that came up with it. And what it is it's only like I can't sign up for the Bennett Award. They ain't gonna take your old pal Tim, because your old pal Tim is a dude, and so it ain't happening. So it's only for women artists, but it's even more streamlined to that. It's women figurative artists.
Hmm.
That's it. If you're a woman artist who does abstract art, this ain't for you. This is only for figurative artists that are women. That's what this award is for, and it's to elevate women. It's to put a focus on women artists, and so I think it's an amazing moment of girl power. And I think it's great. And so we've I actually had them on the show in a previous episode.
Okay.
We talked about the whole award. So if you are looking for that episode, go to our YouTube channel, go to Gagnon Atelier, go to our sub channel, Modern Masters Podcast. You can scroll down and you can see the Bennett Award, and that show will tell you everything you need to know about this awesome award. But it is a major accomplishment, one of the top awards in the art world, especially if you're a woman artist. So, how has it changed your career now that you've won? How have things changed?
Um, things changed from being a finalist. Let's start there.
All right, just being a finalist.
Like things changed just from that. So I think one of the main things that happened for me from the very beginning was collectors that I had not had access to before. They became aware of me and my work, and they reached out to me, and then those relationships began to form. I've had the opportunity to talk about my work more on various platforms like this one. I've had the ability, and this is more personal, and I think I was sharing with them, the Bennetts at one point, that the greatest gift it gave me was time. Because when prior to winning, I was juggling. I mean, hardcore juggling everything to make my art because I just believed that I could make a living with my art. But at the time, because I was teaching full time, I would get up about 3 or 4 in the morning so I could paint before I went to work. Because
Mhm.
after work you come home, there's
You're a
dinner.
wit.
It's hard. And I I would still paint after, but it just wasn't a guarantee that I could get those solid hours in. So I
Right.
would do that ahead of time. And I said to them, I was like, this is great because I get to see what I'm capable of when I put all of my energy into my art
Right.
and
Yeah.
not just having to spread it out. And thus far, that has been amazing and eye-opening for me. The depth that I've been able to go with the work. I've
Right.
been able to communicate with people um, who I've admired for many years and talk to them, personally and get to know them and their work. Um, so that's been incredible. And then I would say another one of the greatest gifts is, yes, those people in particular, but also just people in general, having the opportunity to connect with other artists in their journeys, having the opportunity to build relationships with the other finalists, and see how things are for them in their world. That's not here, but it's elsewhere,
Right.
and we still have these parallels. And it's just, I'm excited about not just what it's brought me thus far, but what it will continue to bring me from here on. So it's been amazing and life changing and more than I could have imagined.
Right. That's fantastic. And you got to raise all your prices.
Yeah, that came with it too.
Yeah, that came with it too. And people will actually pay that amount. That's the cool part. But that when we were talking earlier about how, finding your clients, finding your people, and when you're struggling in your art in your own little circle of friends, they have a budget.
Yeah.
And, for an artist, you need to find people over here that have maybe a higher budget so you can sell your paintings higher so that you can make a living at this.
So that you can make a living. Yeah, that's
It's like at the end of the day, it's like, I got to eat, I got a mortgage, and so there's a certain amount of work you got to do that pays. And, to be a successful artist, you have to find patrons that can afford more expensive pieces that allow you to make more money, make more profit, and do what you got to do to pay
well,
your
and
bills.
yeah, and it also allows, I feel like it allows me to make more significant work because
Yes.
what I want is the work to stand the test of time. I want to speak to the soul of society. I want to
Right.
do my work in public spaces too.
Hmm.
And so it's that being able to afford life is baseline,
Right.
but
Right.
but it's above and beyond that in terms of
Right.
what
But when you are, and that's the beauty of it. It's like having won the Bennett Award and now having collectors that you've never had access to now, that elevates your work. It's kind of like you see those movie stars that they do the action movies, or they do the comedy movies, and then after a while they start doing the more obscure, not studio movies. They make the movies that mean something to them,
yeah, yeah.
and that's the thing. They made enough money that now they can do anything they want.
Mm.
And so success breeds the ability to expand and stretch yourself and work on those types of projects that when you were struggling, you couldn't paint those kinds of things because you needed to make a living. You got to sell enough to eat, to pay
Yeah.
the mortgage, to pay the bills.
You're
So when
thinking
you're
you
just
gotta make more
struggling,
sales. Yeah.
yeah, you got to paint what sells. And then,
Mhm.
so it's like there are certain pieces of art that are super meaningful, but they may not be something someone's going to want to buy, but it would be great in a museum, you
Yeah.
know? And so that we have that kind of thing. Of course, the other side of that is I'm sure somebody would buy it, if it was in a museum, but it allows you to stretch yourself when you're okay financially, that you can breathe. That allows you to then grow and expand. So I think it's a fabulous thing, and it is a great opportunity. Not just the prize money, but the prestige behind it, the connections. One of my greatest mottos in life is that, and there's different ways to say it. I always told my kids that relationships are the highest form of currency. I've had friends that would kind of modify it, and they say that relationships are the currency of the kingdom,
Mhm.
you know, at the end of the day, it's all about relationships, who you know, how well you know them, and the doors that are opened because of those relationships. And that's the beauty of it. If we
Yeah.
would have said, like, look at us, we're here talking on the interwebs now and getting all excited. And where did we meet? We met at a conference of like-minded people. I pulled a giant couch so everybody could sit down, and you sat down. We started talking, and here we are now, 3 weeks later, talking to the world. And so, but that's how relationships are developed. And then that expands, and then we grow, and then that's how everything in the world works, is relationship. Yep. And I think that's the mistake a lot of artists can sometimes make, is they can sometimes be, artists can tend to be introverts.
Yeah, and I'm an introvert. I call myself a high functioning introvert, though. So
that's a great way to put it.
It's a balance, and I have to credit teaching for that, because if it had not been for teaching, I probably would have been so deep into myself that I would not have taken some of the social risks that I have taken. But I've learned that in my life's journey, I agree with 100% with everything you're saying, that it is about people and relationships, but also everything we do is about people. Mm-hmm. Like any work you do, I was talking to my daughter who's interested in being an illustrator. Your work has to serve people.
Yes.
Everything we do is greater than us. It goes beyond us. It is for the purpose of serving people. And it's just a matter of identifying how. So I agree with that, but you can't escape that. And so that's why it's beneficial to those of us as artists, especially, but really anyone that's an introvert, is to find that balance of how you can engage and interact with people without compromising yourself, obviously. Right. But it's important. It's really important because we need each other. And the more we do this, the better we can evolve and grow as a society, because the goal is to get better. The goal is always to get better.
Yes. And I think artists have because we're so used to getting critiqued, we have a mentality of sometimes pain can make you better. When you're getting a brutal critique, you're like, oh, it hurts so bad, but it's so good because I'm going to get better from this, but it's that kind of thing. It's that interaction that may not always be comfortable. I remember when we were sitting on the couch, we were all kind of talking. It was you, me, and Lacey Lewis. And we were sitting there talking about how, even here at, we're all chit chatting, we're all talking, we're all having a great time. But it's like, for the most part, we're talking to total strangers.
Yes.
And so to just sit down and say, hi, I'm Tim, and I'm an artist too. And what do you like to paint? Yeah. And then it was terrifying. It could be terrifying to just go up to a bunch of total strangers and sit down and talk to them. But that's how you find your people.
Yeah. And I think it was easier to find our people there because we were all so much
alike.
That was one thing I said. I think I said it to Lacey, I think I found my tribe.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But yeah, that's so true.
Yep, you really do. So, well, this has been a fabulous conversation. I just had a blast. This is going to be internet gold, is what this is going to be. Internet gold. And so we're going to take the interwebs by storm here. So I just want to say thank you for coming on. Can't thank you enough. I really appreciate you coming on, getting to all the fancy thing. And what did I tell you guys? I told you straight up, we bring you the best of the best of the best on the Modern Masters podcast. And season 3 is going to be absolutely fabulous. I promise you. And we kicked it off with a great one with you, Ayana. So thank you very much. Stay on here. I'm going to say goodbye to our listeners, and then I'll come back on and chat with you for a little bit. But again, thank you for coming on the show. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, guys, there it is. How awesome was that? I can't thank you guys enough for watching. You learned a lot about the Bennett Award. We talked to Ayana about her career, about her art. So wasn't her art beautiful? Oh my gosh. I love the backgrounds being being two-dimensional and then the figure being three-dimensional. Her figurative work is just absolutely stunning. And so you can check her out by going to her website. I'm going to call up her website here again. You can go to AyanaRoss.com. You could also go to the Bennett collection and online and check out her art there and some of the other women artists that are on their collection. And it's absolutely fabulous. If you are a woman figurative artist, you need to check them out and submit some of your artwork to their upcoming art shows and juried art shows and collections and things like that. So check them out. But before you do any of that, check out AyanaRoss.com. And as always, check us out at thegagnoatelier.com. And if you can, like and share this broadcast, we appreciate it. And just remember, guys, as always, I say this every episode, and I mean it with everything I've got. Remember one thing. Well, two things. God loves you, and so does your old pal Tim. We'll talk to you next time.